I'm a teacher by training, so I'm going to do this a little bit differently. I've got a riddle for you, but I want to back up, give some context to this, and say that a few months ago, I happened to be reading what is this sort of classic book of moral philosophy. It's the size of a phone book. It's called After Virtue by this Catholic Scottish philosopher. And in After Virtue, the author zooms out, looks at the last few hundred years, last few thousand years, and says, what if the West is spiraling down the drain? What if civility is becoming uncivil? What if morality is becoming immoral? What if the life of the mind is becoming mindless? What if we are entering a new dark age and there is nothing that we can do to stop it? He ends his book with what has now become this classic quote. The most important thing to do at this stage is the construction of local forms of community in which civility and the intellectual and moral life can be sustained through the new dark ages, which are already upon us. So I was at home and I was reading this book and I was reading the last part of it, and a light bulb went off in my head and I thought, oh my gosh, I know what St. James coffee is. So here's the riddle. What is St. James really? I come to you in this not as a Catholic, not even as a Christian. I come as an outsider, but even I can see how cool this coffee shop is. And in fact, I think that maybe the fact that I come from the outside allows me this perspective on seeing what is really going on here that otherwise maybe people might miss. So I take a lot of friends who are non-Christians and have them visit St. James. And to a person, they all love it. I've been asking them, what is it that is so special about the place? I have one friend, she says, when I come in to St. James, I feel accepted for who I am. And who I am is an atheist mother of 4 noisy kids. I asked another non-Catholic, what is the magic about this? And she said, Melissa, where are you, Melissa? Melissa makes it. Melissa, when we walk in, my friend said, she talks to us, she asks us questions, she asks us about our problems, she hears our answers, she remembers them, and she offers to hold our squirmy babies. So I was not invited here to give any business advice to this nonprofit. And I feel awkward saying this because it may run afoul to the present teachings of the magisterium. But my personal advice to you, all of you at St. James Coffee, is clone Melissa. Any people here who might technically be members of the magisterium, I request that maybe you just forget that you ever heard me say this. I want you to contrast this with what happens at, I don't know, any regular secular coffee shop. Just walk into a local Caribou, walk into a local Starbucks. What will you see there? By and large, people sitting silently on their laptops, guarding themselves with their earbuds, posting to social media about how hard it is to make friends. At St. James, we make friends. So many of us here have actually become friends with one another because we've met each other at St. James. At St. James, it's easy to just introduce yourself to somebody that you've never met before. St. James is a place where everybody wants to know your name. So, dang it. St. James is a place where everybody knows your name. I think I squeezed together 2 lines from that song. And so I ask you, what is St. James really? St. James is Cheers. St. James is the closest thing that Rochester has to an actual bar where you just meet all the people and become one wonderful group of friends. Hijinks and Sue, Ted Danza. It's fantastic. But St. James is even more than Cheers. Okay. If you walk into St. James, what kinds of conversations are you likely to hear? I run an inter-theological, inter-religious, inter-political discussion group, and I've invited a lot of people to come to St. James to see it. And at St. James, I have talked with a Southern Baptist with whom I argued about the age of the earth. I have talked to an Ayn Randian objectivist atheist with whom I argued about whether selfishness really is a virtue. I have argued with many Trump voting Mormons about animal rights and whether animals have souls. And I have argued with one anarchist Greek Orthodox theologian about that most contentious of all issues, education. I say this from the perspective of somebody whose profession it is to work with small groups of people to help them make new kinds of schools that help kids get excited about the wonder in the world and scraping the edge of mystery. And it's with that background that I say that Rochester has 10 institutes of higher learning. We have one world-class research hospital. I won't say which one. And we have the IBM campus that gave birth to the super intelligent AI that is still the undisputed reigning champion of Jeopardy. And if Socrates were to come and visit Rochester now, I think that the closest thing that he would find to ancient Athens and the intellectual milieu there would be a small Catholic coffee shop. So what is St. James? St. James is the marketplace of ideas. But it's even more than that. Okay, third hint. How much do you know about St. Benedict? Sliders from, oh my gosh, I've met the guy, to what? Who now? 3, 2, 1, and slide. Okay, so St. Benedict, Catholic saint, around the year 500, he goes to study in Rome. But in Rome, he finds that Rome is gone. There is no civitas. There's barely any city in Rome. It's been sacked by the Huns before he was born. There is no intellectual life to speak of. There is no moral life to speak of in Rome. And so he retreats, going about 30 miles away to a limestone cave where he prays and he studies and he just spends time by himself until he is asked to come found a monastery. He works with the monks there as their new abbot until one of them poisons his wine. And so he leaves and he goes back to the limestone cave to be silent and pray and study in his own solitude. And then he's asked again to come start with a new group of monks. And he founds his own monastery. Now, his monastery was really different from any monastery that had ever come before. Whereas the city was loud, and his retreat in most monasteries at the time were totally silent, his was this place for amiable conversation. Whereas the city was open entirely to the world and to anyone who would want to ransack through it, and monasteries were closed off, his was a place that had an open door to the world, but was yet its own place. Whereas the city was extreme in this way, and the monasteries that existed were extreme in this way, his monastery was a moderate monastery. And it worked. The most important thing in their monastery, according to the rule of St. Benedict, was to welcome the outsider. They were to have a special kitchen. When they came and ate, they were to eat at the abbot's own table. For, Benedict wrote, in receiving these strangers, these outsiders, you receive Christ. His monastery duplicated itself. Those monasteries duplicated themselves until they were populated all throughout Europe. Because they had an open door to the world, they let in some of the greatest books that had ever been written in the ancient world, and they were copied and they were read and they were discussed. As the book After Virtue talks about, these monasteries preserved civility. They preserved the intellectual life and the moral life through the dark ages that we now look back on. And it is for this reason that St. Benedict has now been named the patron saint, not just, as all of us know him, of the scientists who study limestone caves, but also of all of Europe. What is St. James coffee? I want to suggest that St. James coffee is St. Benedict's monastery for our age. It is literally a local form of community in which civility and the intellectual and moral life can be preserved through the dark. Are we in a dark age? Are we entering a dark age right now? I'll say from even my secular perspective that some days it seems a little bit dim. Seems like the worst elements of all sides are warring against one another. My point is, from the outsider's perspective, we need St. James. We need a place where people can come in, where strangers can be welcomed in and open themselves up to new ideas, to new people. I have a crush on Catholicism. Can I be open about this? I follow what you all are doing somewhat closely. And there are all of these ideas, all these projects that are bubbling up, and it's very exciting. But sometimes when I walk through the open door of St. James, I think, is this maybe the very greatest one? Imagine if this scaled. Imagine if this duplicated. Just to run some numbers and throw some numbers at you. Rochester area, southeastern Minnesota, what do we got? Like 250,000 people-ish. United States of America, what do we got? About 250 million people-ish. That means that for this population, we could have 1,000 St. James-like coffees throughout the country. St. Benedict didn't know what the effect of his monasteries would be. What could be the effect of that? 1,000 places that are unapologetically Catholic and unapologetically welcoming. All we have to do is figure out what this place really is and clone 1,000 Melissas. Thanks.